All right, everybody. Good evening and welcome to this virtual event from Majors and Quinn. My name is Steph. I am a bookseller and the events associate here. And for those who don't know, Majors and Quinn is an independent bookstore in uptown Minneapolis, Minnesota. If it's your first time at one of our virtual events, welcome. We are so happy to have you. And if you are coming back, you know, we've been having this poetry series. So if you're coming back for another one, welcome back. We're so happy to have you again. Thank you for your continued support of the program. This evening, I am so thrilled to introduce three incredible poets who are all going to be reading from their most recent collections, I believe. If you're interested in purchasing any of their works, you can head on over to our website or give us a call. I'll be posting a link and our phone number in the chat for you. We do ship internationally as well as everywhere within the United States. So, you know, we can get it to you wherever you are. And speaking of the comments, please chime in, tell us where you are watching from. And if you have any questions for anybody throughout the event, we will have time for a quick Q&A at the end. So put your questions in the chat and I'll be back at the end of the event to moderate that Q&A. All right, so with that kind of logistical talk out of the way, I am more than happy to introduce our first poet of the evening. Sara Henning is the author of View from True North, co-winner of the 2017 Crab Orchard Series in Poetry Open Competition Award and the 2019 High Plains Book Award. Her honors include the Linda Hull Memorial Poetry Prize, the George Boggin Memorial Award, the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award, and awards from the Sewanee Writers Conference and the Vermont Studio Center. Her work has been published in journals such as Quarterly West, Crab Orchard Review, Witness, Crazy Horse, Meridian, and the Cincinnati Review. She lives and writes in Nacogdoches, Texas, where she serves as coordinator to the BFA program in creative writing at Stephen F. Austin State University. She also serves as poetry editor of Stephen F. Austin State University Press. So with that, we're going to hand it off to Sara. Have fun, everybody.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here tonight reading poetry alongside two other poets and writers whom I have such great respect for. I can't say enough about Jen Givhan and Cyrus Cassells. I also have a little bit of happy news. In addition to Terra Incognita coming out on March 25th of this month, I also recently found out that my next collection of poems, Burn, was selected by Allison Joseph as part of the Crab Orchard series in poetry editor selection and will be coming out next year. So lots of happy news during National Poetry Month. All right. I'd like to share some poems tonight from Terra Incognita. I haven't had a virtual reading yet. I was on tour a little bit last week in person, so it's such a treat to be able to reach everybody who can't go to things in person or who wouldn't be in the area. This book is a very important book for me. I'm very proud of all the work that I do, but this book is special. It's an elegy for my mother. When my mother passed away from colon cancer in 2016, it felt like the world fell out from underneath me. And so for me, writing this book in many ways was a way for me to join the voices that helped me to survive the difficulties of grief, death's bureaucracy, all those things that made life very difficult for a while. I relied on books like Mark Doty's My Alexandria and Marie Howe's What the Living Do, Cheryl Strayed's Wild, Mark Doty's A Heaven's Coast. I relied on these collections that gave me strength and sustenance and ability to know that there was another side to my deep pain, because there is. I feel like deeply that we have the ability to let the grief overwhelm us, or we have the ability to make the choice to recognize that that bad things happen to good people. Grief is intense and awful and all consuming. But there's also the choice to get strong enough to carry our loved ones with us wherever we go. And that was a choice that I made, and that's a choice that I think really informs the trajectory of this book. The first poem I'm going to read to you guys tonight is from the is actually the title poem, and it's a poem that takes place uh, with a reference to an artist, Joe Ando. He was painting pictures of the same horse over and over again in his canvases, and he was doing painting nudes of girls with all of the same face. And his the art critics didn't quite know what was going on, and he couldn't explain it. And he recognized that when he was a teenager, he was in love with a girl, and they used to go skip school and make love in a field by their high school. And there was a day that the horse stuck its head in the car, and it was this delightful moment. And after she passed away, he thought of that moment. Um, so that's a little bit of context. Terra Firma. When my mother died, I dreamed of a man rough sketching on gesso, palette knife scraping the angles of a woman's face. He knuckles thin washes of color the way a man might thumb through a woman, exalting her, erasing her. He's famous for his horses, hunger hardened and sensual, pupils blown open by violence or love. Others thrash with their hooves, escapists hurling forward. I dreamed of the teenage girl always ghosting the interior, cut off blue jeans, black camisole, smoke clenching her body in its silk halo. There's a Zippo next to her, a crushed pack of Lucky Strikes. Her off-frame stare says, listen. It says, I want to tell you everything. Once a mare thrust her muzzle in the shotgun window of his 1967 Chevy Nova. This was years ago, Tulsa. A whole afternoon of hooky in the field off Route 66 by the high school. Rabbits tonguing the husks off of sweet corn. His back sunburned as raw prayer as the radio pulses Van Morrison. The girl in the back seat offering him her body. The mare's face in the window is a flash, a sudden weapon. She could break the young man reaching for her, crush his hands with her jaw. She could bite the girl until her skin gapes and slips, flesh pooling in plush knots. I think of this image when I close my eyes. A girl so lovely it hurts to look at her, a mare wild enough to end everything, a mane that smells like sex, prairie fire, rabbits seething their death song into the glare. The man will call it some heart's undoing, as if to repeat the thing you most want will keep it holy. Like the night his girl falls asleep, her cigarette glimmering. He won't be able to unsee it, her soul lunging its muscled heat into air. Screams chased down by darkness. Or the mare, always the mare. Feral elegy he'll snare into oil. Her mane so light tangled, it could be burning. Smoking in the car. In the belly of every summer day is a God taking its first breath. So I learned to call it praying, my mother forsaking the AC for a grace called smoking in the car. I watch her pry the window's handle as it jams mid-crank, clench the sultry juts of plastic scorching her palms. I watch her jimmy at the glass that will blast only hot air at us, then pull on a spit-glazed filter, her dusky exhale ribboning through the car. Each hit a blitz of nicotine, a prophecy of what's to come. I watch her break then brandish her arm, her body a human seatbelt touching my skin. I close my eyes. I steady myself in my seat. From another car over, I look like I'm on my knees. This next piece is about a speaker flashing back to a time in a lake when things were easier and innocent. And it's called Once I Pray in the Water, Lake Hansen, South Dakota. Blessed be the good time girl, thighs deep in a striped inner tube, cattail fronds and cigarette butts rough against her toes. Blessed be the empress of chic I was, 16, shellacked in copper tone, tangled in a pickup game of football, my hands, muscular birds gripping deep, through blitz and tackle, all the jacked up Fords like drunk cicadas pulsing hymns, through rolled down windows, Stevie Ray and the boss, shredding through steam as I spread my hips, my legs, and lunged. I was a girl kissing boys and sit on top kayaks, another flea-chawed dog, tumblest and brined, as if someone told her, hey, pretty baby, it's time to blow this mortal coil every minute of her life. So I rode the twist and flush of summer until even the stars couldn't look at me. Before I was a woman, sand-hardened late 30s, I slid like a fish into spume. I quaked all night in the weeds. I fed on every shine that would touch me. So, Lord, will you make a temple of the water? Will you brandish your body in lake skin for me? I've had enough of this lemon sfumato, this musk blaze of summer genuflecting like a fool. I've already buried the shameless, pretty young thing I was. I smoked that queen when I kissed my mother, ravished by cancer, watched strange men hoist her body into an oven set to the temperature. All things beautiful begin to burn. I'm going to share two more poems, very short, and then I will turn um, the screen over to our other readers. But I wanted to share a villanelle with you tonight that I think encapsulates what it felt like for me to find solid ground. It's called Terra Firma. I sink my heels into darkness, that silky tether. Grief is an island of mercy touching my skin. It hurts like hell to bury your mother. Longing is my other story, not cancer, not coma hushing her into its dirty hymn. I sink my heels into darkness, that silky tether. Too wicked to die, I thought she'd live forever. She seethed all night on cigarettes and gin. It hurts like hell to bury your mother. I swallowed her storm as if love was duty, not weather. Surges, riptides brazing my heart with her din. I sink my heels into darkness, that silky tether. I hated the menthol scenting her black leather jacket. I still tangle my body up in its sensuous sin. It hurts like hell to bury your mother. What is pain but a story of mercy? It lingers in my blood. All things end to end again. I sink my heels into darkness, that silky tether. It hurts like hell to bury your mother. Elegy in the Shape of a River, Livingston, Texas. If faith is a river, I am the red-eared slider turtle, algae smudged, ducks feasting from my shell. I am the flame-throated Jill, little boat of feathers, gnawing at spores with my bill. Years ago, I gnawed at hope like dusk giving up its clutch, peach slit, indigo hardening the sky. Now stars slit the sky hard. Now I watch stones thrown from the pipe dock. I watch the river rock stunned, the child now running toward his mother's voice the way animals panic in the wake of any small violence. When I lost the baby, I watched love like violence shimmer, linger a moment, then let go. Yes, shimmer, as if faith is a river, as if faith is a river. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really lovely. All right, I am going to bring on our next poet now. Jen Javon is a Mexican-American poet, novelist, and transformational coach from the Southwestern Desert who's earned fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and PEN Emerging Voices. The author of 5 full-length poetry collections, most recently Belly to the Brutal, forthcoming this year from Wesleyan University Press, and the novels Trinity Site, Jubilee, and River Woman, River Demon. Her work has appeared in The New Republic, The Nation, Poetry, and many others. All right, Jen, it's all you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me, and just really beautiful to be here sharing poetry space with you. So I'm going to start out with a poem that I've written this year, one of the few that I've written in the past year. And then I'll switch over to work from Belly to the Brutal. And most of this work, I think much of it tonight, is work that I've never read aloud to anyone before. So I'm really grateful for this space to share tonight. So this is my tween daughter tells me about Jellyfish Lake. Tells me about a body where after the last ice age, sea waters rose, caught in a bowl as if the Isla goddess had scooped her palm, tender with jellyfish, moon and golden, only jellyfish, and let sieve the rest. In that lake, not a creature to harm them. They'd lost the evolutionary need to sting. We could swim with these jellyfish, my balm of a girl tells me. They're harmless. It took 12 millennia to mend them safe. And my daughter, on the cusp of the same years that poisoned me, that taught me to sting. Let the body I've mothered, her girlhood and mine, untwine. Let her always see this lake, her blessing. So the next poems are from Belly to the Brutal, which focus, as the previous poem, on mothering, mostly mothering and daughtering and mother-daughter relationships, and the idea that we carry generational trauma as wounds through the womb, but also that if we carry that generational trauma, then we carry the generational strength and resilience. And the idea that if we can heal the future, right, the next generation, then we can also heal through the bloodline and heal the past. And so the poems are about my experience mothering through the pandemic, and even in the years before that, as an adjunct professor, as sometimes a single mother, and through some patriarchal violence and poverty. But this poem is called The Birds. And I also just write a lot about birds. I love birds. So this is The Birds, but it's still about all of those things. The birds nest in the stinging mallow, where an orange-eyed mother, guarding her slick new birth, regards me with the careful measure I've given every stranger since the rupture. Trick of the mind, telling a story that coheres, that doesn't ooze undone as I've oozed. Hatchling as the click of an oven timer gone off early and trusted over a prick to the gooey center. I pass her thus, each wary for our own reason. I flick pictures of the patient mother, who at first glance seems to smother her nestlings, their parkas marking days into gossamer feathers I remember as the softness of before. Always in a story must come a time when nothing happened, an unwinding, a zeroing, a settling the score of another story's end, trick of the heart, not to see time for what it is, a thief, a distraction, a trickster god come to feign with ribbon and bow, shrouding scissors behind his back for clipping at the umbilicus. For in the final shudder, I startle mother and fledglings into a wreck of plume and reed, chiding myself for abandoned nest, and later and always concrete proof smattering the yard. Those younglings weren't ready, not by far. This next poem is called Of Color, of Landscape, of Tenuous Rope. Where split the earth, our ancients rose like droplets of blood in the snow. I pulled from my throat birdsong like tin-canned lullaby, its vicious cold, its hoax of wings, choking on bones at the throat, rabbit's foot for luck, arbitrary as a dune grave across a vastness, named the place penniless motherhood, named the place country of mothers, named the place anywhere but death by self-infliction is a god of many faces, many nothings. I'm afraid I'll never be whole. I'm afraid the rope from the hardware store, screws for nails, will teach itself to knot. I've looked up noose. I've learned to twine, but these babies now, halfway pruned through the clean bathwater of childhood, I promised a God I would take to the ledge and unveil at the canyon, the pinstripes, the pinkening strobe lights, maybe angels chiseled at creation into the rock around my neck, the rock in the riverbed. I would never let them see. I would never let them break and spend a whole eternity backtracking from that slip. Let us fly and believe in the wreck. Their perfect, hope-sealed bodies are the only parachutes we need. This next one is called The Flash. My 11-year-old son has forgotten not to eat on my bed. He loves watching the flash from my room with the widest windows, the warmest place in our house each winter, and with the coneflower warmth of his brown skin veiled in his bright red suit. He tucks his kinky curls under the cap and ghosts from room to room undetected, sneaking cookies till I climb beside him into piles of crumbs. You're grounded, I echo. And he starts sobbing. And what he says catches the pit of wax burning always inside me. We got him into special ed classes last year after years of fighting with teachers and breakdowns over homework and his father yelling, "You've got to learn to listen," where I kept insisting, "He's trying. He just doesn't understand." And here he slides onto my floor, tears and mucus streaming down his cheeks onto the superhero costume he wears 24/7. The toddlers at the park following him around perennially because he's Iron Man, Flash, Captain America. Mama, I don't know what's wrong with me. Between hiccuping sobs, I forgot. I was hungry. Your bed is warm. I'm afraid I'll go to jail when I'm grown. I'm afraid I'm bad. I always do the wrong thing. I'm already hugging him on the floor where I've joined him as sirens flick on screen, thinking of how his little sister ties his shoes, how years back his best friend scolded, "You have to learn to tie your own shoes, Jer. Do you want your mom to tie them for you when you're 20? And we laughed before we realized we should not have been laughing. How at night I watch him breathing and pray, because when I screamed at his father, for screaming at him. He said he has to learn to listen. I'm trying to keep him safe. Much later, I asked our boy with a milkshake in his hand what he would do if the police, like they did to his daddy in Texas. He beeps, "Electronic Jeremiah is not here right now. Please leave a message." He flashes so quick, I never see him vanish. Okay, I'm going to read you just a few more. So this next one is called The Excavation. My 8-year-old daughter is teaching me how to live with myself. After 34 years in this body, I can finally split myself in two and marvel that now I pass the Bechdel test. What I've let men scavenge, my collarbones, femurs, the fleshy pads of my inner thighs, bite marks butterflying from the clotted cream that cornmeal death has made of my skin, given way to blood poisoning. I haven't done much but get dumped by one and warn the other to stop raping me when I'm dream coming. And he finally, after 13 years together and a year of divorce, understands a sleeping body moaning is not consent. And while he's had to learn truths he should have learned as a boy, I chart a map to my unlearning. I rewatch the film strips of my girlhood with my girl, and she covers her face at the kissy scenes, and very practically, very kindly, but firmly, life coaches the girls and women. You are worth so much more than you know. And finally, I hear from the gift of my womb what my mother never taught me. My daughter transforms the desert of my memory, peels the spines from the cacti, fashions me a crown that asks, who were you when you weren't blooming only for the boys? And I recall the night blooming Sirius, whose bats fly hundreds of miles one night of the year to sustain themselves on the sweet nectar. And how many mornings I missed, how many dark things I emptied myself for. My daughter is a graveyard, by which I mean ripe for rebirthing. She pulls me from the beds I've buried and tells me if she is wise, it's because I've taught her, by which she means I've held myself deep within myself all along. I've plucked bones and swapped for jackrabbit, for wood rat, for javelina, oh tusks, oh glorious horns, I've borne from daughter, from the unmothered loam. I'll read just one more short one. And this last one is called The Decision. When I, one early spring, bedspread yellowed parrots, lay silent, listening, each day pooled in my chest as pneumonia, as thaw flooding wild fields, and as sorry, that's my chihuahua, as thaw flooding wild fields, and as each empty branch armored itself with offshoots, I knew that dead or not, I'd rise as my children's voices wafted from a kitchen below or through a flung open window, announcing to someone taking better care of them than I'll spend the whole rest of the day with Mama. And the truth of it dunked my head into a bucket, and I sputtered a first clean breath. I'm here. I'm still here. And this happening, this springing back, a mother who will love, is now again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. That was really, really powerful work. And now I am happy to introduce our last poet of the evening. Cyrus Cassells is the 2021 Poet Laureate of Texas. Among his honors, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Lambda Literary Award, and a Lenin Literary Award. His 2018 volume, The Gospel According to Wild Indigo, was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award. Still Life with Children, selected poems of Francesc Parcerisas? Sorry.
Parcerisas.
Parcerisas, thank you.
Mhm.
Translated from the Catalan, received the Texas Institute of Letters Surret Deal Fraser Award for Best Translated Book of 2018 and 2019. His latest volume is The World That the Shooter Left Us, four-way books that came out in February of this year. Thank you, Cyrus. It's all you.
Well, that was thanks to Sarah and Jen for such powerful readings, deeply moving readings and testimony of the power of love and family. I'm going to start on a slightly different track. This last week in America was full of violence and shootings. And I think you can tell by the title of the new book, The World That the Shooter Left Us, that gun violence is very much on my mind. So I'm going to begin my reading with a poem called Ready, Aim, Fire. In the ready, aim, fire of the new, indignant, open carry era, bloodstains on the salient leaves and branches of the tree of life, Karina emphasizes, in protean English, we have a plethora of words for lethal weapons. And of course, Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Parkland aren't the three names of coruscating Stop the Presses graces. Rabbi Lev confesses that he must now post a chilling sign proclaiming firearms aren't allowed in synagogue pews or anywhere near the Torah scrolls. Yes, in tabernacles and doleful churches, in wailing school parking lots, we cry, we can't go on living like this. And then we go on living like this. Deadfall, savage protocol splattered all over our classrooms. I'm going to read the title poem, which is about the stand your ground murder of my assistant's father. This happened in May of 2017 over a parking space, and we can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A session. The World That the Shooter Left Us, in memory of Jay Garza, 1949 to 2017. In this one, ladies and gentlemen, beware, be clear. The brown man, the able lawyer, the paterfamilias, never makes it out of the poem alive. The rash all too daily report, the out of the blue bullet, blithely shatters our treasured legal eagle's bones and flesh. And the brusque spectacle of point blank force on a crimson street where a revered immigrant plummets over a contested parking spot. And the far-seeing sages insist, amid strident menads of breakneck patrol car sirens, clockwork salvos, the charismatic Latino lawyer's soul is banished elsewhere without a shred of eloquence in the matter. And the brute churning surfaces of the world, they bear our beloved citizen away, which means austere saints and all-seeing masters. If I grasp your bracing challenge, at our lives' most brackish hour, our highest mission isn't just to bawl, but to turn the soul-shaking planet of the desecrated parking lot, the anti-miracle, the blunt, vitriolic white man's unnecessary weapon, and the ruse of self-defense into justice cries and ballots, into newfound pledges, and particles of light? This is a poem in memory of Eric Garner, who was murdered on the streets of New York for selling loose cigarettes. I think most everyone's familiar with Eric Garner. And he was born in 1970 and died on the street in 2014. The poem is called Is Not, Don't Interrupt the Sorrow. And Don't Interrupt the Sorrow is an old Joni Mitchell song from an album of hers called The Hissing of Summer Lawns. And I was listening to that album a lot while I was writing this book. Is not, don't interrupt the sorrow. A taser is not an answer. A rushing bullet is not a dream. There is no sunny God in an Apollo helmet. A livelong mercenary is not a frisking meadow lamb. Lady Justice is no fearsome chimera, no lurking drone, no business as usual Cerberus. A callous Caesar is not a far-seeing Christ. Listen, a blazing Mississippi cross never presages a Messiah. A daffodil in a sundown town never signals the onset of spring. So, after 2 callous seasons, I finally dared to inquire if my friend's taken too soon father's ousting stand your ground assassin was indeed white, lily white, and naturally his response in this volatile demesne, this gallery of averted eyes and Jim Crack defenders galore was, yes, dear God, of course, yes. Don't interrupt the sorrow, a woman croons, but all I catch is the ack of ink blotter redaction, the X-rated sputter of a black site's waterboarded man, or a flailing cigarette seller, cuffed, gasping for air, jinxing arm and insignia, marring his throat. Is not, is not, is not, is not. I'm going to shift modes, and there are different parts of the book and different strategies. This is a poem about the Ukraine, but from a few years ago, the summer of 2018, in connection to the first impeachment of a certain person you'll recognize. And one of the earlier chapters of this incredible morass that we're in, it's called Quid Pro Quo. Remember that Latin phrase? Quid pro quo, 2 baritones on a phone. Guess there's been a little change in largesse, a little holdup, you might call it, with your country's battle-logged plea for additional funding. Frankly, there's zero need at all to include mealy-mouthed underlings, meddling congresspersons, aggrieved ambassadors, or those cloak and dagger snitches, liberals out and out praise as whistleblowers in heaven's or Tiger Mother Russia's name. It's just between us, artful and enterprising men, 2 baritones on a phone, 2 stable geniuses. Hell, it's wartime, Z, and you're downright starved for superior firepower, for buff state-of-the-art supplies. The filthy lowdown is, I'd like you to slur, impugn, sling bedeviling mud at a certain polling high candidate and his linchpin paper-pushing son. Let me be blunt. I'm the big daddy with the dazzling purse strings, and I've got you by 1, the cowlick, 2, the coattails, 3, your slick ex-Soviet short hairs. Choose one of the above. Boy, I'm the badass overseer with the blade, and I've got you hamstrung as a shackled vetch from swampland slave. But what do you eager garlic eaters, you hinterland guys, know about cotton-picking Dixie field hands anyhow? And so, my cold-cocked marionette, my Ukrainian cat's paw, you do plan to mount and raise your fancy victory flag, don't you? I thought you'd say yes. I'm going to read just, I think, 3 more poems. This is my one pandemic poem I've been able to create. It was written in April 2020. The title is "The Only Way to Fight the Plague is Decency," and the title comes from a quote from Albert Camus' novel The Plague, where Dr. Yu says, the only way to fight the plague is with decency. So this is America, April 2020. Once upon a time, there was a hoax, a broadcast to the hilt Rus, a puerile leader's adamant refusal to rally arms against a colossal viral dragon, a winter hustler's fiat that bloomed one titanic coffin-heavy April into a real as your mama's dying hand pandemic. National Malay featuring stock-selling senators, missing in action test kits, mask-begging nurses, millionaire high fives, and jerry-built morgues. A storm-haired Lear's flaccid sideshow, a charlatan's heedless snake oil matinee. Hail the flim-flamming functionary and his red-handed band of rogues. Land where all the poisonous hierarchies arrived to poison us once more, where raucous pettiness equaled roll calling, brisk as business death, equaled my crushed kingdom for a ventilator. I think I'll end with the final poem of the book. It is a poem dedicated to Scott Warren, the great borderland activist who was tried and acquitted 3 times for aiding people crossing the border. Courage song for Scott Warren. Sing. No more makeshift crosses in the Gangplank Desert. No more, quote, dog catcher trucks. No more jawbones under the moon. Bring your rebellious grit like a bromide or a borderland candle to our bigotry as commonplace republics. Chaos. Bold anima, dissenting angel, among the betraying cliffs and dry washes, the yellow plumes of the Palo Verde, be renegade Harriet in a midnight cane field, General Tubman, be Martin bravely riding in an abysmal Birmingham jail. Yes, your boundless shepherd's gallantry, your at-the-ready compassion is the rescuing sip and the heaven-sent gourd required at all our desperate crossings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cyrus. And thank you, Jen and Sarah, as well. Yeah, just like a powerful evening of poetry. These are my absolute favorite events to do of all time. Anyone in the audience, if you have any questions for the poets, please put them in the chat. I will relay them. But I don't know if you guys want to chat amongst yourselves. I feel inadequate amongst you to discuss. But yeah, I don't know. What are your reactions to each other's works?
Well, Sarah's my poetry editor for my translation, so we're pretty close. And I'm going to read for her class on Thursday. So, but Jen, this is the first time I had a chance to hear you read it. It's really, your work is really strong and so rooted in amazing, relatable truths about family.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was beautiful. I've never heard Cyrus and Sarah, I've never heard you read, and it was just so beautiful to be among you. And Cyrus, your work was so incisive. I was just blown away by the wordplay and that you could play with words while being so incisive. Like, to me, that was just like, ah. And then Sarah, just so emotionally gutting your poems about your mother, just so beautiful.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing that just impresses me the most about both of you that you shared tonight, and from the larger collection, Cyrus, I'm teaching this book this week. The ability to render the sociocultural moment. I mean, that was something that we talked about in class today. Was how does one write right now? How does one process just all of those different things and be able to sort of grapple? I mean, I just as a writer, as a teacher, I would love to hear more about your process.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know how I did it because this is the most mysterious thing I've ever created. I wrote it in 8 weeks. I wrote it 3 years ago, except for the pandemic poem and a poem about George Floyd, in the middle of finishing my 2 other books. So I actually kind of gave birth to 3 books at once in August of 2019. And again, the most mysterious one was this one. So I think what happened is that all my feelings about our country kind of poured out for me when I was overseas. I was in Spain, working my latest book is about Garcia Lorca, and I was in Granada again. And it just kind of poured out of me. And I actually wrote a lot more than I put in the final version. I wrote about 40 poems in 8 weeks. And I was I was kind of going through my Sylvia Plath. I go, you're not dying. It's just coming out of you. And the other book I wrote in like 8 months, the horse, it's called Is There Room for Another Horse in the Horse Ranch there. So our editor passed away, our incredible editor at SIU Press died. And then Martha Rhodes at Four Ways expressed interest in the Horse Ranch book. I said, well, wait a second, I have this other book that I wrote really, really fast. And she says, well, I want both of them. So when the book came out last month, I had to reel back and think about, well, what happened? How did I write a book so fast? Usually books take me like, I'd say on the average, like 3 years or something. So I wish I had a better answer about how to do it. So that's why I found the Adrienne Rich poem that's like the epigraph for the whole book, where she says, don't think I was trying to state a case or construct a scenery. I was just trying to listen to the public voice of our time. I wasn't aware I was even doing that, actually, but it was just an opportunity for all my feelings to pour out about the moment of the election in 2016. And I describe in the poem what happened at our university, which is that we were threatened with torture. There were posters all over our university the very day that threatened liberal-leaning college leaders with tar and feathering, arrest, and torture. And then there was no response from the administration for like 4 or 5 days. I think they were trying to figure out whether it was hate speech or not. We were like, I do believe it is. You know? So the campus erupted, and they were also super anti-immigrants things as well, and super, woke, anti-woke stuff. all on the same day. So that is definitely a historical sort of document in that way. But it just became some kind of necessity to make sense of what we'd been living through for almost 3 years. I guess for where I lived in Texas, we weren't in Austin, so maybe that gave them permission to threaten us all. We're a Hispanic serving institution, but I believe it's still true that my university has been the most targeted by white supremacists sort of postering like this in the whole country. And it's a big university. It's over 40,000. And then we get to realize, well, the FBI and the police don't seem to be coming up with anything. Wonder why. Finally, they've caught some people like half a year later in the parking lot putting up. What people do is they go to these right-wing sites and they download them. And then they, pepper the campus with them. And they kind of give them a slap on the wrist. So immediately we're in a war zone. And I want to remind people of that this incredible in-your-face anti-Semitism, all of this Pandora's box really went into gear the day of the election in 2016. It enabled a lot of behavior. And it really depends on where you were living. I was actually in Boston that week, but we woke up in the war zone, and it was a reminder, since I'm writing about Lorca, how fast everything can collapse morally and politically. He was murdered at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War, like a month into it. So I was very aware from being a Lorca student and working on my new poetry book, which is a homage to Lorca, how fast everything can turn. And we've witnessed some of that in Ukraine. It's been a month, and it's just, you see the difference between a month ago. So we lived through that, and I wrote the poem Election to kind of like, and with the children forming the human swastika, that didn't happen in my area, but it did happen. So the unthinkable and the unimaginable was unleashed in these dynamics that we've been living through. So I finally that summer had plenty to say about it. It's like, okay, I haven't said anything. And in terms of I think it's important maybe to say a little bit about the title poem and what happened with my friend and assistant. So his father was a very highly regarded Latino lawyer. He went to his post office box at night. Apparently he parked in a handicapped parking area, but it was at night. And he came back, and this man claimed that there was a fight, and he struggled, and he shot my friend's father, but there was no surveillance cameras. So with the stand your ground lawyer immediately released. So this man wandered around Houston for months and months. And finally they had the case where, I think it took like a couple of years, the forensic evidence proved that he lied. There was no struggle. He simply shot my friend's father through his mail. So he was convicted on the basis of forensic evidence. So he's been in jail. He's an older white man. I guess he was 69. And he's still unrepented, And it's the same old scenario, the unaccountable, the unrepentant. In fact, I think the civil case started up again 2 weeks before my book was published. And I waited a year. I didn't say anything. I didn't even talk about it to people I knew. And then what happened was a second family in Florida went through almost the same thing. This time there was surveillance and the world knew about it, but they didn't know about what my friend's family had lived through. It was such an incredible nightmare. His father didn't die right away. He died 2 weeks later on pretty much close to my friend's birthday, right? So all I could do when I was overseas was I contacted journalists I knew at the Houston Chronicle. Turns out his dad had worked at the Houston Chronicle when he first came to Texas. Just a series of incredible events. So, and I really didn't think, do I have the right to say anything? Should I say anything? And the answer I got was yes. So I wrote the title poem in the summer of 2018. The other situation in Florida, the same result. The man was convicted of murder. Remember, he fell on the ground and shot the boyfriend of the woman who was there. Same thing, convicted of murder. You can't just off people when, you get in a scuffle or something. So that's what I decided. All right, I'll speak. And then the rest of the book flowed the next summer, right? But that's at the part. It's taken me, I couldn't even like read this poem. I read it today, but it's taken me a long time to be able to just read it without. I just saw a photo of the perp the other day and I just burst into tears. So I don't know about the healing dimension of writing out tragedy, but it gives, grief language and outrage, some kind of language there. So I feel like I've learned by giving myself permission to protest in a way that I haven't quite done in poetry before. I'm still getting used to the fact that I did it. It's like, okay, I'm glad. It's like, I always wanted if I was going to do a kind of political poetry or protest poetry, and I have done, there are elements of that I've done before, but I wanted to be organic, which is what happened. I wouldn't set out to say, I got to do this, I got to say this. Like with the pandemic poem, I didn't think I had anything to say the first month of the pandemic, but I was sheltered before the rest of you. I was in San Francisco. We're the first people sheltered in the whole country. So by then I'd had a month to stew and think. Remember, it was still a hoax. It's still a hoax. You're thinking, oh, come on, people. When are you going to wake up? So this book is a kind of historical document that my other books have not been before. Yeah. But it was a long process to kind of give, and I almost had to be unconscious, like, oh, sure, go ahead. This is like you really felt. Blah, 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 blah. By the way, in case you're wondering, how you actually feel about what's been happening, it's like, so I did it almost unconsciously because, well, the other book is really funny and sexy. Is there room for another horse on your horse ride? So I think the likeness of the other book, which is a finalist for the National Poetry Series, was like, oh yeah, okay, I got that going. I got the sexy, fun, love is still life after 60 children book go. And then this other sort of Guernica sort of scream thing could come out, like, okay, well, you're having fun over here. And then I was also writing about my stay in the Christ in the Desert Monastery in the desert. Like Jen, I'm a big desert person. I grew up in the Mojave Desert. And my last marriage was in Santa Fe. So I put it in quotes, we weren't legally. We sometimes call it faux marriage, but we were actually married in a ceremony here in Santa Fe. So that's another one of the great cross things in the reading tonight. It's like, oh yeah, the desert. I actually prefer the desert of New Mexico to the one that I grew up in there. So even though I've had 8 books, it's like advice, I don't know. You just have to plunge and wrestle with the blank page.
It's so funny because some of my other books have come out in a process very similar to what you're describing, Cyrus, where it was an unconscious kind of just almost a reprieve from other things that I was writing and experiencing in my life. And so at a time when I was dealing with very serious postpartum depression, I was working on a poetry manuscript where I was writing about what that experience was like. And that's Landscape with Headless Mama. That's my first book that came out. But then I, at the same time, was birthing Rosas Einstein, which is a fairy tale kind of a book. And it was like, it still deals with similar themes, but it was in such a completely different way. And it was almost like I have no real recollection of writing it. It was like it just appeared in front of me, But this most recent book, it was a very different process for me, Belly to the Brutal. I've written this over the past 5 or 6 years. And it was a conscious that, I felt like I was mothering these poems because I was mothering my children. And so that's what the process has been. And it's been a growing of my own self as a mother while my children are growing. And so I'm grateful for all the different ways that our books emerge. I feel like I learned something new from each new book. So like a new way to be a poet and a person.
Plus you've been writing in novels, right? Your first book was a big success. I'm encouraged because I've written a novel and I'm about 200 pages in another one. I like poets who write novels. Well, look at Honorary Jeffers. Oh my God, she's like so amazing.
Yeah.
And I've been one of her mentors for about 12 years now. You better believe I'm completely proud of her. Oh my God. And her book was incredible. You know, it's like it's both a literary achievement and a huge bestseller. And I was waiting for people to not be so envious because she's an Oprah Book Club person to acknowledge that it is a literary achievement. And then she just won the National Book Critics Circle Award. I thought, bingo, finally, come on, people. This is really great literature, too. It's not just a pot boiler bestseller or something or other. So, just a reminder, Jen and Sarah, if you would have decided you're going to write it can be done. It's like a whole sort of different world where there's a lot more money involved. But, the thing about being a poet is that there's always that element of like the Trappist monk and his faith sort of thing, or like, oh, money, what? Oh, well, I do this for the love of the art and the love of a lot of other people and things here. So usually there's not the devil whispering like, oh, they're going to make it into a mini series or a screenplay. Or they could start getting more eclectic in what they use as the basis of their.
Right. I know. I think that poetry book should be made into series. Like that would be amazing. Like, so, surreal and magical real. Like I would like to see those.
Well, we got to know more producers. It's all about raising money for projects. My training is actually in filmmaking and film acting. So actually a lot of it's economics.
Sarah, I'd love to hear about your process as well. I know we're running a little bit over time. I'm happy to stay and chat, but I just want to hear a bit from you before we have to leave.
Oh gosh, I mean, I still keep going back to something that Jen said during her reading about carrying generational trauma and carrying generational strength. And, I feel like I'm so just blown away from the way that everyone sort of reacted to these different, different challenges in the world, different challenges in our families. And I feel like from my perspective, terra incognita, like I said in my beginning statements, I really, I wrote a book that, I wanted to be able to pay forward, the kinds of a book that could help folks the way that I was helped by being able to encounter. I mean, really the one that I kept going back to was Marie House, What the Living Do. I was doing so much to memoir, and I don't know. I feel like right now, even though my book is about my intense relationship with my own mother, it was a deep love. It was a flawed love. But right now we live as all of our work, I think, tonight attests. We live in this culture of grief, and how do we exist? How do we find joy? How do we seek closure? And I think the beautiful synonymy of tonight is that we have different works that touch on that.
Yeah. The culture of grief. How do we find joy? Oh, I love that. That's so true. I feel like that is a really deep connection between all of our work. Absolutely.
I just sat with a young friend. He's only 26. His mother died suddenly a couple months ago. And I think I need to get terra incognita to him sometime soon. Right.
All right. Well, we have reached time this evening. So as much as I hate to cut the discussion short, I just want to take a moment again to thank each of you so much for joining us. I know we're kind of scattered across the country here, but I think that's the beauty of these virtual events, that, we all get the chance to hear your wonderful work spoken aloud. So thank you guys all so much.
Thank you. Congratulations, everybody, with our new books.
Yes, absolutely.
Yay.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in.
All right. Thanks, Steph.